Hello, chess fans! How are you doing? Today we are going to look at a very interesting game about resigning in an equal position. This is a game between Scheve and Teichmann, both German masters who played this game in Berlin in 1907. So, let's get right into the game. So, white started with pawn to e4 and black played pawn to e5. Both the players trying to contest in the center. White attacked the pawn with knight to f3 and black defended with knight to c6. So white went bishop to c4 with the simple idea of attacking black's f7 pawn. Now this opening is called the gioco piano, or the quiet opening of the Italian game. So black continued with his own piece development with bishop to c5, saying, okay man, if you attack my f7 pawn, I'll attack your f2 pawn. So white went c3. The idea here is simple, to go d4, and in case d takes e4, then c takes e4, and black will have a very strong pawn center. So there are a number of good moves that black can play here. One of them is, whenever white plays d4, black can simply retreat, right? So why not do it in the first place and save a tempo by going bishop to b6 first? But instead, there's another good move that black played, and that is queen to e7. So how does this deal with the threat of d4, you say? Well, now if white goes d4, then black can simply play e takes d4, and after c takes d4, go queen takes e4 with check. So after a move like bishop e2 or queen e2, black can simply retreat the bishop. So in view of all of this, white decided it is best to simply castle in this position instead of playing d4. Black moves his pawn to d6, further strengthening the e5 pawn and also encouraging his bishop to come into the game. White now goes for the move d4, breaking in the center. Black plays bishop to b6 because black doesn't really have to take, right? If black were to take here, white takes, black retreats, and this is quite a strong pawn center here. So black simply retreats, and in this case the pawn center is still a bit shaky because right now there are three pieces that are attacking the pawn. So white always has to maintain three pieces which are defending it, right? Because if white plays a move like knight to d2, he will cut off the defense of this pawn, or queen to c3 for the same reason. Also, a good move for black here is to play the move bishop g4, pinning the knight and therefore removing this defender from defending the pawn. So what did white do here? Well, he came up with a plan of a4 with a simple threat of moving pawn to a5 and trapping the bishop. So black played pawn to a6. White still went ahead with pawn to a5. Reason being, if now, let's start with if bishop takes. If bishop takes, then you simply go d5 because this knight is protecting the bishop on a5, and once the knight retreats to e8, you are just a piece up. So that's a little trap here. And what about knight takes pawn then? Because now the move d5 doesn't work. But well, can you try to guess the move here? If rook takes a5, bishop takes a5, then what does white do here? I'll give you 5 seconds. Well, white just plays queen to a4 check, and whatever you do to avoid the check, queen wins another piece. So black just loses 2 pieces for a rook and a pawn and is not in a very favorable position. But then black plays quite logically here the move bishop to a7, just parrying the threat, and white plays pawn to h6, another waste of time, because the idea here was to prevent bishop coming to g4, but it creates a lot of organic weaknesses on the king side, and this h3 can become a target later. So black simply develops his knight on f6 with a simple threat of capturing the pawn on e4. White gets a bit over enthusiastic and simply takes the pawn on e5. And after white captures on e5 with his knight, look at that, there are now two threats in the position, with knight attacking the bishop on c4 and the knight attacking the pawn on e4, which is still hanging. And white goes off and exchanges all the pieces with knight takes e5, queen takes e5, and knight to d2. Apparently now both his bishop and his knight is safe, but if you look at the position, there is no more a knight on the f3 square, which is now vacant. However, for black, there is still a queen on e5. So earlier there was a knight here, and now there's a queen, which is very hard to remove. Moreover, black has a very good attacking prospect with all of his pieces aiming towards the king side here, and white is very far behind in development, right? White's really hoping that black just tries to capture this pawn, but black does not need to do that. So here in this position, black played a very interesting and amazing move. I'll give you 5 seconds here to just try and guess the move. Well, so did you get the move? The move is bishop takes h3. Wow! That is a sacrifice that is worth looking at, because black has all his pieces developed well and he's just one move away from castling, whereas white has certain problems, such as the king side. There are not many pieces here, all of them are on the queen side, and there's no protection here. So after white recaptures with pawn takes h3, we have the queen invasion with queen to g3 check, and the pawn cannot take because the pawn is pinned by the bishop here. Wow! So king moves to h1, the first move, queen takes h1, h3 check, king moves back to g1, and now simply knight to g4 with the threat of queen to h2 mate. That is interesting. White tries to protect the mate with knight to f3, but then here comes the blow. What black really wants to do is to attack this pawn, but right now it is defended 2 times. So what you want to do is either remove a defender out of these 2 or add a third attacker, and black can do both of these with just one move, queen to g3 check again, which forces the king to move away, and now bishop takes f2. Wow! Look at all the black's pieces here, the knight on g4, queen on g3, bishop on f2, and you can't take the bishop here because then knight takes f2 is checkmate, and you cannot try to prevent this mate by queen in any kind of way. Well, that is what white thought, and he resigned in this position, and he's like, I want to go home, man. But here, when you try to evaluate this position, you get a very astonishing result. So if I give you 10 seconds, can you find the move here for white which actually saves the game? Well, did you find the move? Did you find the move b4? If you did, well, you're wrong, because that does not save the game. I'm just joking there. But here's an interesting move. Bishop takes f7 check. And what happens if this king takes f7? Let me just try to pull up Stockfish here and see what Stockfish has to say about this position. It says 0.00. It's completely drawn. Why is it drawn though? Well, the continuation here for white can be queen to d5 check. When king moves to d7, then bishop to g5 check. King moves to c7, queen to f5 check. And notice that black does not have any of these squares to retreat, so the only move again is king to c6, and then queen to d5 check, king back, queen to f5 check, king here, and white gets a perpetual. So this boils down to a complete draw. And here, if you say, okay, I won't take the bishop, I'll just move my king up, well, then you can still go bishop to f5, and let's see what the engine has to say about this position. This position is only slightly better for black. It's just close to 0.6 pawns better. That's it. I mean, look at all the pieces for black here, and the engine is still crazy enough to come up with a point value of 0.85 with king f8. And let's just see what happens here. Well, if you now go king to f8, what white can play here to avoid this checkmate is simply the move bishop to f4. Wow! And once queen takes f4, then white just comes back with bishop attacking the knight on g4. And what can really be done here? Knight must go back again, and then rook can simply take the bishop. And when knight takes, this position again becomes very roughly equal. If I pull up the engine here, it says it is 0.60 of a pawn better for black, and it is really difficult to find the accurate moves always, right? So you may end up actually not playing the best moves and giving away equality here. Although black's attack seems very impenetrable as the white king is open, but also black king is going to be in the center. So that was all for this game, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And just to show you once again, in this position, when black thought he was completely winning and that there was no move after the move knight g4 and bishop takes, this is where he resigned. But actually what he really missed was the very powerful move bishop takes f7. So that tells us you should never stop looking for any resources, even though you might be in a losing position. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. Any questions and comments on YouTube? Please do like and subscribe. Bye for now.